Welcome back to Politics Unusual. I'm Morgan Mackay. There was so much happening this week. Let's jump right in. First up, we're going to have State Assemblyman and mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani joining us in the hot seat as we kick off our deep dive into some of the candidates running for New York City mayor. Then some are calling the outdoor dining program disastrous. We have Andrew Rigie from the New York City Hospitality Alliance here to break it down. And then we are following the money and taking a look at who qualified for public matching funds in the New Jersey's governor's race. But first, some stories you might have missed this week. A nonpartisan special election will be held on Staten Island this coming Tuesday to replace now former council minority leader Joe Borelli. There are 3 candidates in the race: Griffin Fossella, son of Staten Island Borough President Vito Fossella, radio talk show host Frank Morano, and middle school teacher Cliff Hagan. And DC 37, New York City's largest municipal union, endorsed City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams for her run for mayor. The union represents about 150,000 active city workers and 90,000 retirees. It also urged members to rank State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani number 2 on their Democratic mayoral primary ballots. Which brings us to our next guest, Assemblyman and mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. So this is, you have been surging in the polls lately. Tell our viewers just a little bit about yourself. You were born in Uganda, but you said you moved here when you were 7 years old. Help explain to our viewers who you are.
Absolutely. So I was born in Kampala, Uganda, in East Africa. Moved to New York City when I was 7, grew up in Morningside Heights, went to Bronx Science, and now I represent Astoria and Long Island City in the State Assembly. I'm in my 3rd term, and as of a few days ago, we'd been in this race for 6 months, and as you've said, we have surged. In that time, we found that New Yorkers are hungry for a different kind of politics. They're hungry for a politics that puts working people first, and that's what our campaign is doing to win a city that New Yorkers can actually afford.
Exactly. And you're a Democratic Socialist, the only Democratic Socialist running in the race. So what does that mean for you?
To me, that means that every New Yorker has what they need to live a dignified life, that it's local government's responsibility to provide that. And I think when you ask New Yorkers in their day-to-day, do they believe in things like public transit, public education, they agree with it. It's just that so often these kinds of ideas have been caricatured as if they're beyond what people actually want, when in fact it's exactly what they want.
So you have a whole list of priorities, and
Yes.
I'm going to just list a few of them because they're all that could fit on this graphic here. But you want to freeze a rent for rent-stabilized apartments, make buses fast by building priority bus lanes and make buses free, provide free universal child care, create a Department of Community Safety, and build a network of city-owned grocery stores. So we're going to pull a few of those out here and talk about them. You want to create a Department of Community Safety, and it would have a budget of roughly $1 billion, consist of mental health teams that respond to 911 calls and have outreach teams at 100 subway stations. So first, which of these 911 calls would these mental health teams respond to?
The ones that are clearly New Yorkers calling in need of an intervention in a mental health crisis. I'll give you one example. I sat with the family of Win Rosario, a young New Yorker who was in the throes of a mental health crisis, called 911 himself to ask for assistance. 2 police officers were sent who had been trained in mental health response, and they killed him within 3 minutes. That is something that does not serve anyone in that situation. He is someone his family is still grieving, and it doesn't leave our city safer. And what we've seen is that across the country, there have been these very approaches that have been successful, whether we're talking about in Eugene or Olympia or Denver. This approach that we're speaking about is evidence-backed, and that's what New Yorkers deserve. They deserve outcomes. They deserve to actually have the safety they've been promised, but they haven't been delivered. And at the core of this is when we ask New Yorkers, where do you feel least safe? They often say the subway system. And that's why we've said we're going to have teams of dedicated outreach workers at the 100 subway stations with the highest levels of homelessness and mental health crises to intervene and provide assistance in the moments when New Yorkers need it most.
You know, we know that many people going through mental health issues are not violent in any sort of way, but on rare occasions there are instances where there is maybe some violence. How do you ensure the safety of these mental health teams if they're in the subway and something does go wrong?
You know, they can always call the police. That is a part of this program, and we've seen that, for example, in one of the programs I was citing elsewhere in the country, about 80% of the calls are resolved without police assistance. And there is a small segment that requires requires it, and for that, it is possible. But ultimately, what we're doing right now is we're taking the police, who have a critical role to play in creating public safety, and we're tasking them with every single failure of the social safety net. And that's preventing them from doing their actual jobs, which is dealing with major categories of crime. And what I've heard from so many New Yorkers is a concern that the clearance rates of those crimes are so low, and part of it is because police officers don't even have time to focus on it anymore.
Would the $1 billion for this department come from the police budget?
No, not a dollar would come from the police budget.
Perfect. And then lastly, one of your platforms to build city-owned grocery stores in each one of the 5 boroughs. It's really gotten a mixed bag response here. You know, I think a lot of people want to see everyone have access to healthy food. And you propose like lowering costs by using city lands or buildings, building food, buying food wholesale, and being exempt from property taxes. So I guess, you know, how would this proposal work, you know, actually, you know, foots on the ground?
Look, I think some of the critique I've heard have been from people like John Katzimatidis, who runs Christie's and is making quite a good bit of money off of New Yorkers in this moment. What I've heard from more New Yorkers, however, is that whether they're making $40,000 or $200,000, when they go to the grocery store, they feel that sticker shock, that the same items they could comfortably buy years ago are now seemingly out of reach. And I look at the example in Kansas, where they have a municipal-owned grocery store. I look at the feasibility study in Chicago, which found that we could do this in an urban setting. And I think about, why should New Yorkers not have that? Why should they not have not only access, but the ability to buy goods that are within their price range? So the core of this is cheaper groceries as a guarantee. The cost of this is $60 million to set up 1 store in each borough. So that's 5 stores as the pilot program. Now, that should be compared to the city's existing program called City Fresh, where they're set to spend $140 million subsidizing corporate grocery stores without any requirement for lower prices, any requirement for collective bargaining, or any requirement that they even accept SNAP or WIC. So we would take less than half of the money the city's already set to spend and actually deliver results.
From my understanding, it seems like Chicago just recently decided not to go with the city-run grocery store and maybe do like a public market sort of a thing instead. And then the Kansas store, it required, it seems, from my understanding, a lot of volunteer work, donations to sort of get it going.
You know, what we are seeing in our city is an incomparable capacity to deliver on this kind of a promise. And I am confident that by putting city government behind a actual tangible plan to deliver cheaper groceries, we would be able to deliver that without the need of volunteers, but rather through the power of the public sector.
So now critics have also brought up your stance on Israel, and Israel usually isn't a topic for a mayoral race, but this year with everything going on, I know a lot of people have critiqued your stance, and so I just wanted to get you on the record where you stand and give you a chance to respond. So, you know, 7 days after the Hamas terror attack in Israel, you were arrested for protesting outside Senator Chuck Schumer's office. Why did you feel the need to get involved so early and so quick after this terror attack?
So I had already said then, as I say now, that October 7th was horrific and it was a war crime. And I was invited by Jewish New Yorkers to attend that protest. It was actually organized by thousands of Jewish New Yorkers. And I stood with them outside to make clear that their tragedy, their immense suffering, should not be used as a justification for the creation of more of that. And what we were seeing even that quickly was an immense amount of a military attack that was killing tens of and hundreds and thousands of Palestinians, innocent civilians. And at the core of my position about Israel, Palestine, any place in the world is consistency and international law and human rights. Because I believe that justice, freedom, safety, those are things that should be applied to all people. And sometimes when you say that, you're caricatured in ways that have nothing to do with what you've actually said.
So do you believe that Israel has a right to statehood? And if you're elected mayor, would you, how would you have responded to some of the Palestinian protests that have been happening on college campuses here in the city?
I believe that Israel has a right to exist. I've said so, and I will continue to say so. And I believe that the First Amendment is a cherished right of this country and is so much of what makes me proud to be an American. I think that we've seen that as something that is under attack by the Trump administration, and it requires us to stand up for our Constitution and our New Yorkers, while also making very clear that these protests are things that we should always ensure they are within the bounds of that First Amendment, and that's what I have seen by and large.
Now, you also were the first mayoral candidate to hit the fundraising cap.
Yes.
And you just released your first TV ad. So we're going to take a look at it real quick here and discuss.
It's because corrupt politicians like Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo have sold us out to billionaires and corporations, rigging the economy against us. Now, Cuomo's running for Adams' second term. I'm Assemblymember Zohran Mamdani, and I have a different vision.
So you have been great at social media, great at these videos. I've seen you go viral multiple times now. And you really kind of hit in this TV ad, at least, on former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Tell me more about your goal with this ad.
I want to introduce Andrew Cuomo as the governor that he was, not the governor that he says that he was. And there's a clear difference here, where so much of his reputation is a mythology that he helped to burnish with public dollars, even as he received a $5 million advance for writing about his leadership in a crisis which sent at least 15,000 New Yorkers to their death in nursing homes. And so the opening of this ad is those facts. This is a governor who cut Medicaid. This is a governor who stole hundreds of millions of dollars from the MTA. This is a governor who's been credibly accused of of sexual harassment by more than 10 women, and introducing him as really running for Eric Adams' second term, because that's what this is. And then in contrast, our campaign, a campaign for people to actually be able to afford the city that they call home.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer these tough questions and really address some of the concerns that New Yorkers have right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A leader deserves to do so. Thank you.
For more of our interview with Mamdani, head over to our website at fox5ny.com. Coming up next, politicians playing the blame game. We're going to dive into why New York City's outdoor dining program is frustrating both lawmakers and business owners. Welcome back to Politics Unusual. Outdoor dining is what kept businesses alive during the COVID pandemic. And at its peak, more than 12,000 restaurants in the city applied to operate those outdoor dining sheds. But these sheds blocked parking spots and some were filled with trash, leading to this temporary program being shut down. However, the city council finalized a new outdoor dining program that just launched on April 1st. And joining me now to talk about it is Andrew Rigie with the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So this new program, how is it working? City Council held a hearing this week and said at one point it was a disastrous rollout, but what are businesses telling you right now?
Well, that's certainly one way to describe it. You know, businesses are having a tough time. We know outdoor dining saved thousands of restaurants, 100,000 jobs during the pandemic, and we are hoping for this new and improved permanent program that was going to cut the red tape, reduce bureaucracy, reduce fees, more restaurants would participate. And unfortunately, we have high fees, we have bureaucracy, we have red tape, and there's a lot of frustration. So the City Council is looking at how we can make reforms so more restaurants can participate, more people can dine al fresco, and there'll be less frustration.
Yes, and some of the complaints have been so far that there needs to be more transparency in the application process. Some of the requirements are a little too strict. And, you know, one business owner was testifying this week in that city council hearing that she spent $36,000 just to get up and running for the season.
And that's one of the big challenges with the roadway cafes, because the city council actually made the program seasonal. So now you have to set up your outdoor dining, pay all the fees associated with it, and then come the winter, you're going to have to break it down, put it in storage, and then pay to have it put back up the following spring. That's adding tens of thousands of dollars on top of the cost that restaurateur was talking about, and it's become cost prohibitive for too many small businesses when the whole purpose of the program in the first place was to make it affordable and have outdoor dining in neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs, not just concentrated in Manhattan.
Now, some of these outdoor dining rules that they've been proposing, or excuse me, they initiated, they require, like you said, they have to be removed by November 29th. Also, if they're street cleaning, restaurants must stabilize them with water-filled barriers instead of sandbags, which they said incentivized rats to build nests before. So do you feel like that sort of solved the problem, at least with that?
Yeah, and to be fair, there's actually a lot of things in this new program that are better than the pre-pandemic program and fix fix a lot of the challenges that evolved after, 5 years of an emergency program that started kind of falling apart on the street because these things weren't winterized. When someone set up a roadway cafe back in, 2020, they never thought that that same thing could be out there in 2024. So they addressed a lot of the standards, addressing things like sanitation and cleanliness and how the water gets through to the drains. So there are good things too in it.
Do you think they're making it harder maybe for these structures to go up to preserve parking spots? Or what are you guys proposing that the City Council does to make it easier for businesses?
Well, when it comes to the roadway dining, there needs to be an option for restaurants to have year-round streeteries because they just can't afford the cost of setting them up, breaking them down, storing them, tens of thousands of dollars. On the sidewalk cafes, that is a year-round program, but because they can't enclose them with nice winter vestibules, they're losing out on tons of business. Workers are going to have their hours cut, even jobs are going to be lost, and people that want to dine at restaurants that would like to sit in the outdoor area if it could be enclosed can't. So that could be a change too.
Well, I look forward to hearing more of your recommendations as this continues to roll out. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, we're going to shift to the Garden State where all eyes are on the race for governor. We're digging into the amount of public financing some of the top candidates are generating as we're counting down to primary day. Welcome back. The Democratic and Republican primary for the New Jersey governor's race is a little more than a month away. And as of this week, the New Jersey gubernatorial public financing program has distributed almost $33 million to 8 candidates. Candidates get a maximum of $5.5 million in public matching funds, and at least 2 candidates are now maxed out. Among the Democratic candidates, Congressman Josh Gottheimer is now the first to hit the cap for his party, but Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill is almost there. She can still receive an additional $2,700. On the Republican side, Jack Ciattarelli was the first candidate in the race to hit 100% of the total matching funds available to him. State Senator John Bramnick did not receive any matching funds, although he has qualified in the past. But Bill Spadea receiving some public matching dollars, bringing the total amount of funds he has received to almost $2 million. Nadine Menendez has been convicted for her role in a years-long bribery scheme with her husband, former New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, and was found guilty on all 15 counts. Nadine and her husband have now been both convicted for accepting bribes in the form of cash, gold bars, and lavish gifts from 3 New Jersey businessmen in exchange for political favors to benefit the government of Egypt. Bob Menendez was convicted last year, becoming the first public official ever convicted of acting as a foreign agent while in office. He's set to begin serving an 11-year sentence in June, but has vowed he will appeal. Nadine was with her lawyer outside the courthouse earlier this week.
It was a very rough day for us. I have no doubt in my mind that the jury did what they thought was right, and I don't think there's any point to my standing here and debating any of that, and so I declined to do that.
Nadine Menendez is scheduled to be sentenced on June 12th. Next up, we're going to test your knowledge of the tri-state region, so stay with us as we take a look at some political history. It's time for our political flashback, where we look back at significant days this week in history. On April 23rd, 1789, President-elect George Washington moved into the Samuel Osgood House, also known as the Walter Franklin House, making it the first official residence of a U.S. president. It housed George Washington and his family until February 23rd, 1790, during New York City's 2-year term as a national capital. Finally, tonight, it's trivia time, a time to test your skills and knowledge of some local political history. Last week, we asked you who first referred to New York City as Gotham City. The answer, Washington Irving. Irving is famous for his short stories like The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle. He was also the first person to nickname New York City Gotham in an 1807 issue of his literary magazine. But of course, Gotham City is best known for being the fictional home of Batman. There were a few of you who got it right this time, so keep the answers coming. I love reading them. Now, to this week's question, where is the smallest piece of property, of private property in New York City located? Don't Google the answer, but take a shot at it for fun. Go ahead and scan the code on your screen. That's going to take you to our website, fox5ny.com, where you can type in your answer, then check back here next week to see if you're right. Thank you so much for joining us for another week of Politics Unusual. I'm Morgan Mackay. We look forward to having you back here next week.